Most gardeners are exhausted, frustrated, and honestly confused about why their neighbor seems to harvest buckets of tomatoes while they struggle to keep a single zucchini plant alive. The dirty secret nobody talks about is that productive gardens have almost nothing to do with hard work and everything to do with understanding a few simple principles that nature figured out millions of years ago. If you stick with me for the next few minutes, I'm going to share 20 permaculture hacks that will completely transform how you think about growing food. These aren't complicated techniques that require expensive tools or years of experience. They're simple shifts in how you set up and manage your garden that let nature do the heavy lifting while you step back and actually enjoy the process. Some of these hacks might even make you a little angry because they're so obvious, yet almost nobody teaches them to beginners. Before we dive into these garden-changing strategies, I want to ask you a quick favor. If you're someone who wants to grow more food without burning out, hit that like button right now because it tells the algorithm that this kind of practical content matters. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss future videos packed with real solutions. And honestly, if you know another gardener who's working way too hard for disappointing harvests, share this video with them because these hacks genuinely work. Hack number 20 is something I call the chop and drop method, and it's stupidly simple yet incredibly powerful. Instead of hauling all your garden waste to a compost pile far away, you literally chop plant material and drop it right where it falls between your growing plants. This creates instant mulch that breaks down directly where your plants need the nutrients most. You eliminate the work of transporting material, building and turning compost piles, and then hauling finished compost back to your beds. The worms and soil microbes do all the composting work for you right in place while simultaneously protecting your soil from sun and rain. Hack number 19 involves understanding guild planting, which sounds fancy but really just means growing plants that naturally help each other. Picture a fruit tree surrounded by comfort that mines deep nutrients and provides mulch, nitrogen-fixing clover that feeds the soil, aromatic herbs that confuse pests, and flowers that attract pollinators. This combination creates a mini ecosystem where each plant contributes something valuable. You water once and feed many different plants. You plant once and get multiple harvests. You create habitat for beneficial insects that handle pest control so you don't have to. Moving to hack number 18, let's talk about hugelkultur beds, which are basically buried wood covered with soil and compost. Old logs, branches, and woody debris get buried in your garden beds where they act like giant underground sponges. As the wood slowly decomposes over years, it releases nutrients steadily while retaining moisture through even the driest summers. I know gardeners who water their hugelkultur beds half as often as conventional raised beds and still get bigger harvests. The initial work of building one pays dividends for a decade or more. Hack number 17 is strategic plant placement based on how often you harvest something. Think about it logically. Your kitchen herbs that you snip daily should be steps from your back door. Salad greens you pick every few days belong in zone 1, close and convenient. But your winter squash that you harvest once in fall can grow at the far edge of your property where you rarely walk. This simple concept of zones means you naturally visit your high-maintenance plants more often while low-maintenance crops essentially grow themselves with minimal attention. For hack number 16, we're talking about swales, which are essentially ditches on contour that capture rainwater. Imagine gentle trenches dug along the natural curves of your land that catch rainfall before it runs away. Water soaks in slowly, hydrating soil deeply and recharging groundwater. Plants downhill from swales develop deeper roots and need far less irrigation. One afternoon of digging can save you thousands of gallons of watering over the seasons ahead. During drought years, while neighbors scramble with hoses, swale gardeners often notice surprisingly little difference in plant health. Hack number 15 introduces the idea of perennial vegetables, and this one genuinely changed my entire approach to gardening. Annual vegetables demand replanting every single season, meaning repeated soil preparation, seed starting, transplanting, and all the vulnerability of young plants. But perennial vegetables like asparagus, rhubarb, walking onions, sorrel, and sea kale come back year after year, often producing earlier in spring before annuals even germinate. You plant once and harvest for decades. The root systems grow deeper each year, accessing nutrients and water that shallow annual roots can never reach. Hack number 14 involves creating what permaculture designers call stacking functions, which means making every element in your garden serve multiple purposes. A trellis that supports beans also creates afternoon shade for lettuce that would otherwise bolt in summer heat. A chicken coop positioned against a greenhouse shares warmth in winter. A pond moderates temperature extremes while growing edible water chestnuts and attracting frogs that devour slugs. When every element pulls double or triple duty, your garden becomes incredibly efficient. Less space produces more food because everything interconnects and supports everything else. Now for hack number 13, let's discuss edge maximization. Nature produces its greatest abundance where different environments meet, like where forest touches meadow or water meets land. You can deliberately create more edges in your garden to capture this effect. Curved beds have more edge than straight rows. Keyhole-shaped gardens create accessible edges throughout. Even something as simple as using wavy borders instead of sharp geometric lines increases the productive edge where plants thrive. More edge means more microclimates, more beneficial insect habitat, and ultimately more food from the same square footage. Hack number 12 brings us to ground cover living mulches, which are low-growing plants that blanket the soil beneath taller crops. Instead of bare dirt or wood chip mulch that you must constantly replenish, living mulches like white clover, creeping thyme, or sweet potato vines cover soil actively. They suppress weeds through competition rather than smothering. Many fix nitrogen or attract pollinators. They create cool, moist conditions at soil level that benefit neighboring plants. And when they get too thick, you simply chop them back and the trimmings become free organic matter right where they fall. For hack number 11, we need to discuss the incredible power of polycultures versus monocultures. Traditional farming plants huge blocks of single crops, which creates paradise for specific pests and diseases while exhausting particular soil nutrients. But mixing multiple species together confuses pests, spreads disease risk, and creates balanced nutrient cycling. Growing corn, beans, and squash together, the classic three sisters combination, gives you nitrogen fixation from beans, vertical structure from corn, and living mulch from sprawling squash leaves. Each crop helps the others. Pests have trouble finding their target plants amid the diversity. This brings us to hack number 10, and we're halfway through these garden-changing strategies. If you're finding this helpful, take 2 seconds to hit that like button because it genuinely helps more gardeners discover these techniques. Subscribe if you want more practical content that actually makes growing food easier. And consider sharing because so many gardeners are working themselves to exhaustion when they don't need to. Here's something that might surprise you about why most gardeners struggle. They're constantly fighting against their local conditions instead of working with them. They try growing tropical vegetables in cool climates or water-hungry crops in dry regions, then wonder why gardening feels like such a battle. The most successful food growers I've met chose plants adapted to their specific climate, rainfall patterns, and soil type. This single mindset shift eliminates enormous amounts of frustration and failure. Hack number 10 itself involves self-seeding crops that literally plant themselves year after year. Certain vegetables, when allowed to flower and produce seed, will drop those seeds and come back the following season without any intervention from you. Lettuce, arugula, kale, tomatoes, dill, cilantro, and dozens of other crops can become self-perpetuating if you simply let a few plants complete their life cycle. After a season or two, you have vegetables appearing throughout your garden in places you never planted them. It feels almost magical, but it's just plants doing what plants naturally do when we stop being so controlling. Hack number 9 covers sheet mulching, also called lasagna gardening, which lets you create new garden beds without any digging at all. You layer cardboard directly over grass or weeds, then pile on compost, leaves, straw, and other organic materials in thick layers. The cardboard smothers existing vegetation while everything above breaks down into rich planting medium. Worms move in and do all the soil incorporation work for you. You can plant directly into the layers within weeks for transplants, or wait a few months for seeds. Either way, you transformed useless lawn into productive garden without ever picking up a shovel. For hack number 8, we explore food forests, which are intentional ecosystems designed to mimic woodland edge environments while producing edible yields at multiple layers. Imagine tall fruit and nut trees forming a canopy, with smaller fruit trees below, then berry bushes, then perennial vegetables, then ground covers, then root crops, and even climbing vines ascending the trunks. 7 distinct layers of food production from a single space, and once established, a food forest requires dramatically less maintenance than annual gardens. The diversity creates resilience. Beneficial insects establish permanent populations. Fungal networks connect plants underground and share resources. Hack number 7 introduces beneficial insect habitat, and this one saves countless hours of pest management for gardeners who implement it properly. Instead of constantly battling aphids, caterpillars, and other crop munchers, you create permanent homes for the predatory insects that eat them. Beetle banks, insectary strips of flowering plants, brush piles, and small unmowed areas all shelter ladybugs, lacewings, parasitic wasps, and ground beetles that consume enormous numbers of pest insects. You stop being the pest controller because you've hired a permanent crew of tiny predators that work for free. Hack number 6 covers water harvesting earthworks beyond just swales. Berms, terraces, ponds, and rain gardens all capture precipitation that would otherwise run off your property, carrying precious topsoil with it. Directing roof runoff into garden beds through simple channels can provide thousands of gallons of free irrigation monthly. Sunken beds in dry climates catch and hold every drop of rain. Raised beds in wet climates ensure drainage while berms hold moisture. Understanding how water moves across your land and strategically guiding it to where plants need it reduces irrigation work dramatically while improving plant health. For hack number 5, we're entering the most impactful strategies, and I want you to pay close attention because these final hacks represent genuine game changers. Hack 5 is about timing and succession planting done simply. Instead of planting everything at once in spring, then having a brief overwhelming harvest followed by nothing, you plant in waves. But here's the lazy gardener secret: you don't need complicated schedules. Just replant whenever you harvest something. Pull out finished lettuce, pop in new seeds. Harvest spring peas, immediately plant fall broccoli transplants. The bed never sits empty, weeds never get established, and harvest spreads across the entire season. Hack number 4 involves integrating animals into your garden system in appropriate ways. Even on tiny properties, quail, rabbits, or a few chickens can dramatically reduce work while increasing fertility. Chickens scratch and turn compost, eat pest insects, and produce nitrogen-rich manure. Rabbits generate perfect garden fertilizer with no turning required. Ducks patrol for slugs and snails. You're not adding work by keeping small animals because the animals are performing work that you would otherwise do manually. They convert kitchen scraps and garden waste into fertility while providing eggs, meat, or both. Hack number 3 emphasizes deep mulching, and I'm talking genuinely deep layers of organic material, not the token inch or 2 most gardeners spread. 12 inches of wood chips on pathways lasts years while suppressing all weeds underneath. 6 inches of straw between plants eliminates virtually all hand weeding and water needs. The mulch breaks down slowly, constantly feeding soil life below. You stop battling nature's tendency to cover bare soil with plants because you've already covered it. Mulch provides what nature wants while giving you the benefits of weed suppression, moisture retention, and soil building simultaneously. Hack number 2 involves observing your specific property conditions before making major decisions. This sounds almost too simple, but the gardeners who skip this step waste enormous amounts of time and energy working against their site instead of with it. Where does frost settle longest in spring? Plant frost-sensitive crops somewhere else. Which corner stays wet after rain? Perfect for moisture-loving crops. Where does afternoon sun bake soil dry? That's your Mediterranean herb spot. One season of careful watching teaches you more about your land than any book or video ever could. Then your planting choices start succeeding instead of failing, and gardening becomes dramatically easier. Now we've arrived at hack number 1, the most powerful permaculture principle for growing more food with less work. This hack encompasses everything else we've discussed while adding a crucial element that most gardeners miss entirely. The number 1 hack is building soil biology rather than just feeding plants directly. When you focus on creating healthy living soil filled with bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and larger organisms, those soil creatures do the work of nutrient cycling, pest suppression, and plant feeding for you. They take raw organic matter and transform it into plant-available nutrition exactly when plants need it. They create soil structure that holds water and air. They form relationships with plant roots that extend effective root systems by hundreds of times. Practically speaking, this means prioritizing activities that feed soil life. Adding diverse organic matter. Minimizing disturbance that destroys fungal networks. Keeping living roots in the ground as much as possible. Avoiding synthetic chemicals that harm beneficial organisms. As soil biology flourishes, your garden transforms from a system where you must provide everything into a system where soil provides almost everything. Plants grow stronger, resist diseases better, and produce more abundantly while you do progressively less work each season. There's something deeply satisfying about walking through a garden that essentially runs itself while producing abundance. You start recognizing connections everywhere. That flowering herb isn't just pretty, it's feeding the beneficial wasps controlling your cabbage worms. That fallen apple isn't waste, it's feeding soil organisms that feed next year's tomatoes. The whole garden becomes a living system where your role shifts from labor to designer and gentle guide. Growing food this way feels different than conventional gardening. There's less rushing and struggling, more observing and appreciating. You develop patience because you trust the system. You develop creativity because you see opportunities everywhere. You harvest food that tastes remarkably better because it grew in genuinely healthy soil connected to thriving ecosystems. If this video helped you see food growing differently, smash that like button because it tells the algorithm to share this with other gardeners who need these ideas. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you catch the next video in this series. Share with someone who deserves an easier, more abundant garden because everyone deserves to experience growing food without constant struggle. The old approach to gardening, where humans do everything and fight against nature constantly, simply doesn't work for most people long term. It leads to burnout, disappointment, and abandoned gardens turning back to weeds. But this different approach, where you set up systems that work with natural principles, creates gardens that improve and produce more year after year while requiring less intervention. Your first season might involve setting up these systems. Your second season involves refining them. By your third season and beyond, you're harvesting abundantly from a garden that almost runs itself. Remember this truth: nature grows forests without anyone digging, fertilizing, or weeding. Prairies produce enormous biomass without irrigation systems or pest control sprays. Your garden can tap into that same natural productivity once you stop fighting against how ecosystems actually work and start designing with those patterns instead. Growing more food isn't about working harder or longer hours. It's about working smarter by letting natural systems do what they do brilliantly while you guide the results toward producing food humans want to eat. These 20 hacks represent the beginning of that journey. Each one you implement reduces future work while increasing future harvests. Combined together, they create gardens that would amaze your neighbors while requiring a fraction of the effort traditional gardening demands. Start with whichever hack resonates most with your current situation. Add another when that one feels natural. Build gradually and observe constantly. Before long, you'll look at your productive, thriving garden and realize that growing abundant food was never about working yourself to exhaustion. It was always about understanding and cooperating with the incredible growing power that nature already possesses.